February 1959. The Northern Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. A single tent pitched high on an open snow slope. Inside are 9 experienced hikers, students and graduates, strong, trained, prepared. Sometime in the night, all 9 cut their way out of the tent from the inside and run into the dark, in sub-zero cold, half-dressed, some without boots. Every one of them dies on that mountain. Some from the cold, some with injuries that to this day are argued over. 67 years later, no one agrees on what came down that slope. In late January of 1959, a group of hikers set out on a winter expedition into the northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. Most of them were students or recent graduates of a technical institute in the city of Sverdlovsk. They were experienced, they were fit, they were, by the standards of their own demanding pastime, a serious and capable group. The expedition was led by a young man named Igor Dyatlov. The route they had planned was a difficult winter trek, the kind of trip that, completed successfully, would earn the group a senior grade of hiking certification. The group set out with 10 members. Early in the journey, one of them, a man who had fallen ill, turned back. That decision saved his life. He would become the only member of the expedition to come home. That left 9, and their names matter, because every cold case begins with names. The 9 who continued into the mountains were Igor Dyatlov, the leader, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Ludmila Dubanina, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustem Slobodin, Yuri Krivonashenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest of the group and the most experienced. They were due to reach their destination and then send a telegram confirming the expedition was complete. A date was expected. Their families knew roughly when to listen for word. The telegram never came. The final stretch of the group's journey is known mainly from 2 sources: their diaries and the photographs on their cameras. Both were recovered later. Both have been studied for decades. The diaries record an ordinary hard expedition. Cold, wind, the routines of a winter trek. There is nothing in them in the days before the end that reads as alarm. On the 1st of February 1959, the group made its way up onto the slope of a mountain in the Ural range. The local indigenous people, the Mansi, had a name for the area. The group's plan had been to cross a pass and camp lower down, in the shelter of the tree line, where there was wood and protection from the wind. Instead, for reasons that have been debated ever since, they pitched their tent high on the open slope of the mountain, exposed, above the trees, on the bare snow. It may have been a simple decision, poor visibility, a wish not to lose the height they had gained, a judgment by an experienced leader that the open camp was acceptable. They dug the tent partly into the snow. They settled in for the night. Their last photographs show the group making that camp in fading light. Sometime after that, in the dark, in deep cold, on that open slope, something happened inside the tent. When the expedition failed to send its telegram, and the days passed with no word, families grew alarmed. Eventually, a search was organised. Searchers went into the mountains in late February, and on the slope where the group had camped, they found the tent, What they found is the foundation of the entire mystery. The tent was still standing, more or less, though partly collapsed and buried in wind-blown snow. Most of the group's belongings were still inside it. Their boots, their warm outer clothing, their equipment, and the tent had been cut open from the inside. Examination of the fabric indicated that the cuts in the tent wall had been made by someone inside it, cutting their way out through the canvas rather than leaving through the entrance. Leading away from the tent, down the slope, searchers found footprints in the snow. The prints showed that the group had left the tent and moved downhill, toward the tree line, roughly 1.5 kilometers below. And the prints showed something that has disturbed people for 67 years. The hikers had walked, not run in panic in scattered directions, but moved down the slope in a reasonably ordered way. And they had done so without their boots. Some in socks, some, it appeared, barefoot, or nearly so, in deep snow, in the dead of a Ural winter night. 9 experienced winter hikers had cut their way out of their own shelter and walked away from their boots, their clothing, and their only protection into a cold that could kill in a matter of hours. Searchers followed the trail down toward the trees, and over the following weeks, they found the 9 hikers. They were not found together. They were spread out across the slope between the tent and the tree line, and beyond. Near the tree line, at the remains of a small fire, searchers found the first 2 of the group. They had, it appeared, tried to make a fire beneath a large cedar tree. There were signs that branches had been broken from the tree. These 2 had died, the early findings indicated, of the cold. Between the tree and the tent, strung out along the slope, searchers found 3 more, including the expedition leader, Dyatlov. Their position suggested they had been trying to make their way back up toward the tent when they died. They too had died, the early findings indicated, largely of exposure. But the last 4 members of the group were not found until much later, months later, after the deep snow had begun to melt. They were found in a ravine, some distance away, under a thick depth of snow, and the condition of these last 4 is where the Dyatlov Pass case becomes genuinely difficult. Several of them had serious internal injuries, major chest injuries, a serious head injury, injuries that medical examiners compared in their severity to the kind of force produced by something like a car crash or a major fall. And yet, in several cases, there was relatively little corresponding damage to the outside of the bodies. The force, it appeared, had been powerful, and in some sense, broadly applied. This combination, severe internal injury, less external injury, is one of the central puzzles of the case. It is consistent, some experts argue, with the pressure of a great weight of snow. It is consistent, others argue, with a severe fall into the ravine. And it has been read, by those drawn to stranger ideas, as something that no ordinary explanation can cover. The Soviet investigation of 1959 examined the scene, the bodies, the tent, and the diaries. And its conclusion, in the end, was famously frustratingly vague. The investigation closed with a finding that the hikers had died as a result of in a phrase that has echoed for decades, a compelling natural force that the group had been unable to overcome. It did not name what that force was. It did not explain why 9 experienced hikers had cut their way out of a tent and abandoned their boots. The case was, in effect, closed, without being solved. And the area, for a period afterward, was reportedly restricted to hikers and travellers. That vagueness, combined with the secrecy of the era, is part of why the Dyatlov Pass case grew over the decades into one of the most famous mysteries in the world. Because when an official explanation refuses to be specific, the empty space fills with theories. Some of those theories are grounded and physical: an avalanche or a smaller snow slab striking the tent, severe weather, extreme wind, hypothermia, which is known to cause confusion, poor decisions, and even the removal of clothing by people who feel, paradoxically, too warm. Other theories reach further: secret military testing in the area, an explosion or weapon, some natural phenomenon, some infrasound, some event the hikers could not see, but could not bear to stay near. And a few theories leave the physical world entirely. For 67 years, all of these have competed because the official file in 1959 left room for every one of them. In the modern era, the Dyatlov Pass case was formally looked at again. Russian authorities revisited the case and conducted a fresh review, examining the slope, the conditions, and the long-debated question of what had driven the hikers from their tent. The modern review came down in favour of a natural explanation. The conclusion, in broad terms, was this: that a slab of snow above the tent had begun to give way, an avalanche or a smaller snowslide. That the hikers, in the dark, feeling or hearing the danger, had cut their way out of the tent to escape being buried. That they had retreated downhill, toward the trees, intending to wait out the danger and return. And that, once on that slope, underdressed, without boots, in extreme cold, in the dark, unable to find their way back, the mountains simply did the rest. The cold killed some of them. A fall, or the snow, accounted for the severe injuries of others. Researchers outside the official process have also contributed. Modelling work has been published, arguing that the specific shape of that slope, the way the tent was cut into the snow, and the conditions that night could indeed have produced a small delayed slab release, one capable of causing serious injury without leaving the obvious, classic signs of a large avalanche. For many people, this is a satisfying answer. It is physical. It is consistent. It explains the cut tent, the ordered retreat, the injuries, and the deaths, without anything strange at all. But it has not ended the debate. Those unconvinced point out that the slope's angle is modest, that the classic signs of an avalanche were not obvious to searchers, and that some details, the exact spread of the bodies, specific injuries, still invite argument. The modern review gave the case its most credible explanation yet. It did not, for everyone, close the file. 9 hikers went up onto that slope in February of 1959. None of them came down alive. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Ludmila Dubanina, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustem Slobodin, Yuri Krivonishenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, Semyon Zolotaryov. The pass where they died now carries the name of the young man who led them. It is known as Dyatlov Pass, a place named permanently for a death. The one man who survived, the 10th member, who had turned back early when he fell ill, lived for many years afterward. He carried, for the rest of his life, the knowledge that an illness had separated him from 8 friends who did not return. The Dyatlov Pass case became one of the most discussed mysteries of the 20th century. It has been the subject of countless books, investigations, documentaries, and expeditions back to the slope itself. And it endured for a specific reason. It is not a mystery of who. There was no other person on that slope. It is a mystery of what, and above all, of why. Why 9 careful, capable people cut their way out of their only shelter in the middle of a killing cold night and walked away from everything that could have saved them. The modern explanation answers that question as well as it has ever been answered. But the mountain itself has never said a word. 67 years after 9 hikers died at Dyatlov Pass, the case is, depending on who you ask, either solved or still open. A modern official review has put forward a physical, natural explanation: a snow slab, a forced escape from the tent, a fatal exposure on the slope. Independent researchers have published modelling that supports it. And yet, for many people, some questions still do not sit quietly. The angle of the slope, the severity of certain injuries, the exact pattern of where each hiker fell, the obstacles to ever knowing more, are now severe. The witnesses who searched the slope are mostly gone. The era of the original investigation was an era of secrecy. The mountain has been swept by 67 winters. What endures is the shape of it. A tent cut open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints walking downhill in the dark. Boots and clothing left behind. Severe injuries with no clear cause standing over them. And 9 capable people who chose the killing cold over staying in that tent. We may never know with full certainty what they heard, or felt, or feared in the moment they reached for their knives. But we know they cut their way out. We know they walked away from safety. We know that whatever was in that tent with them, real or imagined, they could not stay another minute beside it. And that, for as long as cold cases are remembered, is what keeps the file open. Even when the snow has long since settled. Chalkline file doesn't promise you answers. Sometimes the file is open for 67 years. Sometimes the only witness is a mountain. 9 experienced hikers pitched a tent on an open Ural slope in February of 1959. Sometime in the night, they cut their way out and walked into the cold. None of them came back down. What we have, 67 years later, is a tent slit open from the inside, footprints leading downhill without boots, injuries that experts still argue over, and a modern explanation that not everyone accepts. If you know something the file does not, a name, a recollection, a story carried in a family from someone who searched those slopes in 1959, every detail still matters. even now, even 67 years on. Cold cases stay cold until they don't. This was the Dyatlov pass file.